Good evening, I'm Hafiz Marzuki. Our top stories for tonight. Malaysia will not bow to external pressure in tariff talks, says PM. And Philippines Marcos set to be the first Southeast Asian leader to meet Trump in his second term. More coming up on AWANI International. Malaysia will not bow to external pressure that could undermine national policies, including tariff negotiations with the US. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim says his administration draws a red line on preserving Bumiputra policy in trade talks, even if deemed discriminatory.
Malaysia ini tegak dengan beberapa dasar telah kita terima pakai. Kalau mereka tak setuju, nak buat bagaimana? Kita harap dia setuju. Tapi kita ini red line kita. Perolehan, sistem perolehan. Kita ada juga keperluan untuk kita beri peluang kepada syarikat tempatan. Itu red line kita dalam rundingan. Sebab itu rundingan kita itu lebih teliti dan lebih tegas. Dan kerana kita harus terus berdagang dan baik dengan semua negara. Amerika Syarikat itu penting sebab saya sebut pelaburan Amerika Syarikat itu tertinggi. Pelaburan dan perdagangan. Tetapi tidak ada negara yang boleh letakkan syarat dan menekan kita.
Anwar said Malaysia would continue to strengthen trade relations with other countries, including China and ASEAN, while safeguarding national interests. He also revealed that through his relationship with Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, Petronas has been invited to participate in oil exploration and production in Brazil. Anwar further noted that the Egyptian government has granted Proton opportunities to establish the country as a production hub for the North African market, contributing to a 34% increase in trade with Egypt within a year.
Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will meet US President Donald Trump tomorrow. This comes as Marcos is aiming to secure a better trade deal ahead of the August 1st tariff deadline.
Before departing from Manila, Marcos said discussions would center on security, defense and trade. Marcos will be the first Southeast Asian leader to meet Trump in his second term. The US ran a nearly $5 billion trade deficit with the Philippines last year on $23.5 billion in bilateral goods trade. Trump recently raised the proposed tariffs on Philippine imports to 20%, up from April's 17% threat. Marcos arrived in Washington on Sunday and will meet Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Monday. He is also set to meet US business leaders investing in the Philippines during his visit.
We'll have more after the break. Stay tuned. US President Donald Trump may visit China ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or APEC summit set to take place from October 30th to November 1st. He could also meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC event in South Korea, according to the South China Morning Post, citing multiple sources.
Both countries are working to end a worsening tariff war that has disrupted global trade and supply chains. Trump is pushing for steeper tariffs on Chinese imports of up to 55% and has set an August 12th deadline for a final agreement. The last high-level talks were on July 11th during the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting and related meetings in Malaysia, where US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi described their meeting as productive. On Friday, China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao said Beijing wants stable trade ties with the US, adding that recent talks in Europe showed a tariff war was not necessary.
European shares were subdued early in the session as investors assess a mixed bag of corporate earnings while awaiting a potential trade deal between the United States and the European Union. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick expresses his confidence that Washington can secure a trade deal with the bloc before August 1st, which is a hard deadline for tariffs to kick in.
He added that there was plenty of room for a deal after speaking with European negotiators. European basic resources gained 2.6%, the most among sectors, while automobile fell 0.3%. Among stocks, Ryanair gained 5.8% and was one of the biggest percentage gainers in the Stoxx 600, after Europe's largest low-cost carrier's net profit more than doubled its April to June quarter. Conversely, Stellantis fell 2.4% after the automaker said it expects a net loss of 2.3 billion euros for the first half of 2025.
China will take necessary steps to firmly protect the legitimate rights and interests of its companies, says a China Commerce Ministry spokesperson. The statement comes in response to the EU's 18th sanctions package against Russia, which includes several Chinese firms and financial institutions.
Two small Chinese banks near the Russia-China border were sanctioned as part of measures to block Russia's war funding. The spokesperson said the EU went ahead with the sanctions despite repeated objections from China, calling the move groundless and unacceptable. It stressed its firm opposition to unilateral sanctions that lack UN Security Council approval or legal basis under international law. The move comes just ahead of a major summit in Beijing on Thursday, where EU leaders are set to meet President Xi Jinping and Premier Li Qiang.
Iran has confirmed that fresh talks with European powers will take place on Friday in Istanbul. According to state media, Iranian diplomats will meet with Britain, France and Germany, known collectively as the E3, the first since US strikes hit Iranian nuclear sites a month ago.
The group has, over the past months, warned that sanctions could return if Tehran does not resume talks on its nuclear program. Iran has repeatedly said it will respond strongly against such action. Since September 2024, Iran and the E3 have held multiple rounds of talks on the nuclear issue and sanctions relief. Western countries and Israel accused Iran of pursuing nuclear weapons, a claim Tehran denies. On June 13th, Israel launched surprise attacks targeting key military and nuclear facilities in Iran, with the US joining the attacks days later. Prior to that, Iran and the US had been engaging in several indirect nuclear talks through Oman. Meanwhile, Iran's top nuclear advisor, Ali Larijani, met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Sunday to discuss rising tensions in the Middle East. The Kremlin said Putin reaffirmed Russia's position on regional stability and a political resolution to the nuclear dispute.
Now, Japan's ruling coalition has lost its majority in the upper house, but Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba says he has no plans to step down so far. Speaking on Monday, Ishiba says he must stay on to handle key trade talks with the US and address economic challenges following a major election setback.
Voters went to the polls on Sunday amid growing frustration over rising prices and the threat of US tariffs, issues weighing heavily on the Liberal Democratic Party and its coalition partner Komeito. After polls closed, Ishiba said he accepted the result, adding that he won't expand the coalition but pursue a mutually beneficial trade deal with the US and work with the opposition to tackle inflation. Ishiba's LDP, which has dominated Japanese politics for most of the post-war era, and Komeito won 47 seats, 3 short of a majority in the 248-seat upper house. While the vote doesn't directly determine the fate of Ishiba's minority government, it piles pressure on the embattled leader, who already lost control of the more influential lower house in October.
Israel's military has launched an air and ground assault on the city of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. This is its first ground offensive there during the 21-month conflict. Deir al-Balah is currently sheltering thousands of displaced people from the southern Gaza areas of Rafah and Khan Yunis. The military had issued evacuation orders in the city on Sunday, urging people to move towards Al-Mawasi on the Mediterranean coast. The city hosts dozens of critical facilities, including clinics, humanitarian warehouses, and water infrastructure. The United Nations Humanitarian Office described today's assault as another devastating blow to aid efforts in Gaza. Meanwhile, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said it has been receiving desperate messages of starvation from inside Gaza, including from its own staff. Gaza's health ministry also reported 19 deaths from starvation in the last 24 hours. Bangladesh has signed a 5-year deal to import 700,000 tons of wheat annually from the US. This agreement comes as Washington plans to impose a 35% tariff on Bangladeshi exports starting August 1st.
Officials in Dhaka hope the deal will help reduce Bangladesh's $6 billion trade deficit with the US and improve conditions for key exports, especially garments which dominate shipments to the US. The tariff hike has unsettled Bangladesh's ready-made garment sector, which fears losing competitiveness in its largest market. The wheat import initiative is part of a broader diplomatic effort to ease tensions and open further trade negotiations. Bangladesh's Ministry of Commerce officials said talks are still ongoing with US counterparts to lower the tariff, warning that high duties could harm Bangladesh's market position.
Syrian authorities has evacuated Bedouin families from the Druze majority city of Suwaida on Monday, following a ceasefire that ended deadly clashes in the southern province. Clashes between militias of the Druze religious minority and the Sunni Muslim clan has killed hundreds and threatened to unravel Syria's already fragile post-war transition.
State media said the government worked with local officials to bring in buses to evacuate around 1,500 Bedouins from the city. Officials gave no further details on the evacuation or its link to broader peace efforts. The ceasefire, announced Saturday, halted a week of sectarian violence that left over 1,100 people dead. It came just hours after the US said it brokered a truce between Syria and Israel, following Israeli attacks on Suwaida and Damascus. The UN Migration Agency reported more than 128,000 people being displaced after a week of tit-for-tat kidnappings and attacks. On Sunday, the first humanitarian aid convoy arrived in the city, which has been facing power and water outages, as well as shortages of fuel, food and medical supplies.
Now that report wraps up AWANI International tonight. Stay tuned for our reports on the rivalries, strategies and the shifts behind the power affairs driving the new global order. Visit international.astroawani.com for more. Be sure to follow our social media accounts at Power Affairs. I'm Hafiz Marzuki. Thank you for watching. Good night.